Hello everyone, I'm Jingxi, and today my partner and I are going to talk about cram school and elite early education. We will elaborate this topic from 5 parts, with an introduction, our position statement, case studies in natural science about the brain development, and a social case in terms of the positive results of having lifelong benefits for the children. Then first, welcome my partner Xinyu to present her parts.
I will introduce about the background information for this topic. Firstly, we want to define what are cram school and elite early education. A cram school is a school that teaches a highly accelerated curriculum. Typically, these kind of schools are designed to provide supplementary education. And elite early education is children receive education in their early childhood period and development. It's a kind of educational method aimed at cultivating elite awareness and ability of high potential adolescents. And there are some current situations about cram schools. Cram schools are most popular in Asian countries such as Japan, Korea, China, and India. And for US, people here just reply that they seldom heard about cram schools, but most of them always call tutoring services or test preparation centers. They regard these kind of systems as a significantly positive effect on children's analytical ability and mathematical performance. And next, we just want to introduce you about why we support this kind of statement and explain our proposition from 2 aspects. The first is about the natural science. We just find that children's brain will develop after receiving the cram schools or elite early education. The other is about the social science perspective, which just means that children who get this kind of elite early education will socially well behave. Scientists just show that an enhanced learning environment during the first 5 years of life shapes the brain in ways that are apparent 4 decades later. We can also see the image that 90% of brain development occurs before kindergarten. So from the above theories, it can be explained that we should seize the opportunity to let children receive education as early as possible to exercise their brains. We all know that a newborn baby has all the brain cells that they will have for the rest of their lives. But what really makes the brain work well are the connections between the cells. The brain connections allow children to move, think, communicate, and do almost everything. At least 1 million new neural connections per second, more than any other time in life. So in this case, we can see that the connections between those cells will enable children to speak and think in a more complicated way. In this way, we need to promote or boost the connections between brain cells, which will make children become healthy brain development ability and achieve adults' need. Therefore, early education is very important for the development of children's brain because it sets a condition to stimulate children's connection of their brain cells, and it has a great promotion effect on the establishment of children's thinking, brain moving flexibility, and intelligence. Next, I will introduce a case study about natural science to emphasize that elite early education will actually have an active influence on children's brain development. There is one case that study followed children who continued to participate in the Foundation Program, which is an early intervention program. Remy just started his research in 1971 in North Carolina to study how childhood early education affects brain development. especially into future adulthood. The researchers looked at brain cells as a whole, including the outermost layer of the cortical brain, as well as 5 regions selected for their expected association with the intervention to stimulate children's language and cognitive development. They searched for the babies start at 6 weeks of age, and those baby subjects receive 5 years of high-quality elite early education. They need to study for 5 days a week. When scanning the results of their brain, the researchers found that children in the education group had increased the size of their entire brain, including the cortex. Also, the cellular and molecular organization of nerve connections or synapses become more complex. Nowadays, most neuroscientists believe that neural connections or synapses, the complexity of the cellular and molecular organization, are really the key factors of the brain capacity. This view is supported by the findings that intelligence and the frontal lobe and the correlation of gray matter volume is really high. Gray matter in the nerve cell bodies and synapses rather than purely brain cells. Other studies comparing synaptic proteins between different species have shown that what makes up synapses at the molecular level has had a huge impact on intelligence throughout the whole history. In this case, from above research and theories, we can just conclude that elite early education and the high-quality education in children's early period is very important or significant for their brain development, just because those kind of education will help to promote or stimulate the complexity of children's cell connections or their molecular organization of nerve connections in their brain. The complexity of these kind of systems will let children have a higher capacity of their brain, which in the end will cause a higher intelligence. So that's why we support this elite early education from the natural science, because it's actually develop children's brain and have active influence on children's brain. Maybe just bring more higher intelligence and increase their brain development.
In addition to what Xinyu mentioned about what the early study and education could bring to children's brains, I will share a case study from social aspects, and here's a quote. For many countries, investments in young children are the mark of prudent thinking and wise resource allocation, because we should always approach the top of the list of requisite investments, said Sharon Lynn Kagan, the professor at Columbia University's Teachers College and Yale University. This is a comprehensive, multi-year examination led by Kagan. The result of early education at age of 3 or 4 doesn't really show immediately, but it does have long-term, lifelong effects. 6 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. With different economic levels were involved, which are Australia, England, Finland, Hong Kong, Korea, and Singapore, who provided early care and education. The institutes are either financed by the government or the private sector. They offer near universal systems that guarantee some level of education for children at age of 3 and older. Particularly, the data from the England government presents that by the time English children who attended this cram school had finished reception, which is junior kindergarten, 66.3% of them had reached a good level of development. That includes measures of academic skills like reading, mathematics, and writing, as well as measures of non-cognitive skills like self-confidence, making relationships, and being imaginative. Early education actually gives kids an advanced chance to develop, and the later systemized cram school will continuously provide them with rich knowledge and skill to improve their living and academic ability. And based on all the data provided by the National Education Association, it generally concluded that children in early childhood education programs are less likely to be arrested, less likely to be identified as having special needs, less likely to struggle with substance abuse as an adult, and they're more prepared academically for later grades, more likely to graduate from high school, and they are higher earners in the workforce. In a world of limited resources, we have to set priorities, and I think that the public in general feels that addressing children with the greatest needs makes sense as our first priority, said Catherine Stevens, a resident scholar with the focus on early education at the American Enterprise Institute. Could be a good wrap-up for why we should encourage elite early education investment in kids to maximize their mental capacity while they are still young. In conclusion, our group presents the reasons we support elite early education and cram school from both the neuroscience and social science aspects. Though the result of elite early education may not be apparent immediately, it does have lifelong effects on kids who have it. Socially, children involved in early education will be more likely to be well behaved in their later lives, but less likely to be arrested or have special needs. And academically, those kids' mathematics and writing abilities are higher, as well as their non-cognitive skills like self-confidence, making relationships, and being imaginative. Admittedly, there are potential challenges for such early elite programs to run. Families in financial poverty, for example, may not have the money for their kids to get elite early education. Therefore, they need government supports and maybe publicly funded institutes to aid. The 5 places I mentioned above, except Hong Kong, offer provisions for infants and toddlers, whether it be subsidized care or extended paid parental leave. Moreover, cram school and elite early education could also involve some immigrants' problems or cross-nation cooperations in education. Thus, better regulation from the government and immediate adoption of relevant institutes should keep up for the better development of children while they are still young. Here's our references, and thank you for listening.